All right. I want to talk about something that is related to trauma in a very big way. That concept of shame. So, in order to define it, I want to start by contrasting it with guilt. So, guilt is actually a pretty useful feeling that we get. Reason being is guilt tends to send the message to me that I've done something wrong, so it gives me the opportunity when I feel that guilt and when it's accurate to the incident or the situation that I'm in, it gives me the opportunity to make changes, right? To apologize, maybe do something along those lines. So, and generally speaking, when I do something like that, the way I know that this was guilt is it goes away because it serves its purpose. It comes, it allows me to apologize, to make amends, whatever it is that I need to do, to forgive myself, to put myself in a place where I admit my fault and maybe get an opportunity to be forgiven. And that doesn't happen all the time, but at least give myself the opportunity to forgive myself and move forward. And so guilt can be a very useful emotion. Now, shame is a little different. Shame says or sends me the message that there's something wrong with me, which is such a hopeless message, right? So um, it tends to be one of the hardest wounds to heal, and it shows up nearly in every trauma. You know, if you've experienced trauma in your life, chances are there is some type of shame sitting along with the trauma within your body there. Research does show us that people that have post traumatic stress, so some of the features of that, getting flashbacks, getting dreams, being hypervigilant around things. So people who experience that or experience complex trauma of any type, um, those are not the only things that show up. They also carry very deep shame. Like it is something is wrong with me, and that's why I'm experiencing this, or that's why my nervous system is responding to this trauma that way. But because trauma wires the nervous system to believe I am the problem, it sits within our body like that. That's why so many people live with self criticism, with perfectionism, or with people pleasing, because these are ways of escape from that shame. They're not personality quirks. They're basically survival strategies. You've learned to, your body has built them. You've learned to stay safe by utilizing these things so that you can avoid sitting in that shame, because shame is really hard to sit in. And there are certain things that make shame even harder. um, it doesn't fade with time the way that other wounds might, because we do have some wounds that over time you're like, yeah, this doesn't trigger me anymore. Shame isn't one of those, unfortunately, because it is stored in the body, and the body really carries it in a way where it's like it serves as a reminder system that whenever it's activated, something's got to be done because we don't feel safe. And it reacts in a way that tells us, oh my gosh, this is happening right now, you got to do something right now, or this is a threat, we can't just let it go, we have to do something about it. Which is why healing shame isn't as simple as repeating to myself over and over again, I am enough, I am worthy. These aren't bad things to say to myself, obviously, and they are true of me, but it really doesn't touch shame like that, unfortunately. Positive self talk is extremely important. You guys hear me talk about that in sessions all the time. But on its own, it just really doesn't reach shame the way that it is held in our bodies, and the way that it's wired into our nervous system. Shame um, dysregulates. It activates my nervous system. I have a physical reaction, and so for me to come and bring the logic when I'm dysregulated, it's not going to work, right? I need to regulate first. And self talk can eventually also be very, very useful towards the end of that process of working through and healing from shame. So, we can't really outrun it that way. Healing shame really takes something a lot deeper, creating safety within my own body, releasing what's been held inside my body for so long, and being seen, right? And rebuilding the trust in my relationships and in my own story. Those are your biggest pieces that can lead you to that healing from shame. And shame can be, or maybe, a part of your past, a part of my past, but with time and with the right support, the right tools, it doesn't have to define my future, right? And I just want to kind of go back and talk about how it lives in my body, just for clarity on this. So sometimes it'll kind of show up in your face, just that heat in your face, or a knot in your stomach whenever it shows up, or that urgency to hide, to avoid. And sometimes addictions are a part of that, when you're kind of trying to outrun it or run away from it, and you freeze and you hide into something, some type of a behavior that tends to be repetitive. Um, and the interesting thing about all of that is that shame is not going to come to you and announce itself, by the way, I'm shame. It's very good at disguising. So it's very hard, and it takes a while for someone to say, I guess I feel shame, right? It doesn't come as easily. It hides in things like overachieving. It hides in things like people pleasing. If people are okay, that shame settles down. So I'll do whatever it takes, even if I am, destroying myself in the process, to make sure that others are okay and others are happy with me. That's the people pleasing piece. Then my shame subsides just for a little bit, right? But again, that's how it's showing up, as people pleasing, as opposed to, oh my goodness, I feel shame. I want to sit with that and see what's happening there. It also hides and disguises in freezing up, in harsh self criticism, that self talk. It's like, I'm so stupid. Why did I do that? How dumb was that? How did I not think of this ahead of time or early enough? Right. And so at some point, usually in our past, shame felt protective. um, when it wasn't fully safe for me to be myself, overachieving, pleasing people comes in pretty handy, right? It helps with these things, and then it pushes that shame to hide, and then I don't have to deal with the intense sensations and emotions in my body and the dysregulation of the shame. I can just focus on that other thing, and I don't have to be fully myself. The behaviors around it, the pleasing, the perfecting, the withdrawing, they help me survive. So it has served a purpose, and it does serve a purpose. And that's why it disguises so well, and it tricks me into believing that I'm okay sometimes. And shame has also a tendency of feeling permanent, because every time it's activated, my body reacts as if it's happening for the very first time. So I talk about that a lot in sessions too, that idea of like my amygdala being triggered, and the amygdala doesn't hold a timeline, doesn't understand or know when something has happened. It just knows that it happened, and it categorizes it as unsafe. And when it puts it in that category, my body is going to do whatever protective measures it's ever done in the past that had helped, overachieving, hiding, whatever it is, to settle it down, right? And so I tend to be very hyper vigilant towards certain things in my life because of it. And that's why it feels so permanent, because it's repetitive. It keeps showing up, keeps getting triggered. And I keep going into overachieving. I keep going into perfectionism, into people pleasing. And that's why I start feeling like this must just be me, must be a personality thing. And we get frustrated with ourselves. Why do I always want to please other people? Why am I just letting myself be a doormat? Why can't I just, right? Well, shame is driving this car, and it's wanting to protect me, and so it does these things so that we don't have to sit with that concept within our bodies of, the problem is me, I am bad, and there's nothing to be done there, it's hopeless. The only way is to just disguise and hide, which isn't the truth, right? But my body doesn't know that. And that is precisely the reason that logic doesn't really work when it comes to shame, at least not at the beginning. It just doesn't reach it because it's very visceral. On its own, the positive talk is not going to help me reach a place of healing. And I can tell myself I'm worthy 1,000 times, but if my body is wired for danger and wired to be hyper vigilant, to like catch it as soon as it happens, the words are just not going to land in the right place to help that healing. So on the other end, the avoidance doesn't work either. So if you find yourself kind of jumping in that pendulum from, I am doing things that may also be repetitive and addictive, to hide and to outrun it, and then find myself just going to the other end, right? Trying self-talk and trying, no, I'm worthy, I'm good enough, I'm okay, things are okay. You find yourself just kind of going back and forth like that, depending on the season. Um, that is procrastinating working on the shame, unfortunately. And I know we don't do that on purpose. We're really just trying to survive. But it becomes that cycle, and it keeps that cycle alive. That going back and forth keeps that cycle alive. So we gotta do something different. And so our key to healing is that, um, it, the first step, I guess, to the healing is acknowledgement. Because shame is so good at hiding, we can look at our lives, and this is a good place of reflection, and asking myself, where do I see shame in my life? How is it manifesting itself? Is it in addictions? Is it in avoidance? Or is it in overachieving, in trying to be perfect? Some of these, where is it? How is it manifested? Where do I see it? Where what sits underneath that is that sense of, I'm not good enough. I'm bad, and something is wrong with me. And so I have to keep hiding from that by overachieving, by running away from it. And once I'm able to start by doing that, by that acknowledgement, I might feel unsafe doing that by myself on my own. And there's a reason for that, because, isolation, right? Shame thrives on isolation. It becomes really important that I bring it to the light with a place where I feel safe, a person I feel safe with, a group I feel safe with, right? Or if I'm spiritual, even bringing it into my spirituality, right? If I talk to God, that's a good place to bring it, if that's my belief system. Just bringing it into those spaces, then it can be in a place. I can talk about it in a place, address it in a place, acknowledge it in a place without judgment, and in a place where I feel safe. Because an anecdote to shame is a sense of safety. What healing looks like is it begins with noticing the voice of shame without judgment, without judging myself for having these thoughts, just acknowledging that they exist. And over time, you start paying attention to how your body feels instead of shutting down. So I'm not going to, as soon as I feel it, just run. No, I feel it. Okay, just sitting in it. This is what it feels like. I'm acknowledging that. I'm noticing that. That is shame. Then I can start becoming more curious. What is the origin of that belief? I'm a bad person. Where is that coming from? This is hard. I'm not underestimating the difficulty of this. This is hard, but these are processes that happen over time. This is not an overnight thing. This is not a quick process. It's quite slow, right? And you'll find yourself going back and forth. You acknowledge, you see it, and then you run away. Then you acknowledge, you see it, you sit in it for a little bit, and then it gets super uncomfortable, and then you run away, right? And so it's just a process, and that's the work. That is the work. And when it starts feeling safer, I can start sharing it with someone that I trust, or in a space where I find trust. Because again, the antidote, sorry, to shame is connection. Shame can be very isolating. It makes me want to hide behind something positive or something negative. The idea is just hiding, right? But revealing it and opening it and finding connection, that's really where healing does happen. And like I said, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a process of returning to safety again and again and again until healing starts taking place. And because it often needs support, I have to be proactive around finding support and doing that on purpose. So as you reflect on this, asking yourself questions like, well, where, how, who can I do this with? And in therapy, I do, you guys know I do IFS parts work, and a lot of you have experienced parts work with me. Some of you have experienced ART as well. And so both of those modalities, there are a lot of somatic work, like we're just really working on the physical sensations as we do that. So we are processing and we're rewiring the nervous system when we use these types of therapies, and it can safely release that shame. So once we get back to the virtual therapy, we can also address these things. But for right now, as you're doing the reflection, noticing without judgment, sitting with that, some of the physical sensations are really great places to start, because it's hard to do IFS and ART without first sitting with them and acknowledging them, right? We got to find it first. There isn't one path to healing. This is just one that I'm describing to you. And healing is very integrative and very personal. So understanding that we're different from each other. And something really important that I want to also leave you with, healing from shame doesn't mean that you never feel shame again. Okay? It means that shame is no longer, it no longer defines you. It no longer defines your worth or runs your life. Okay, that's what healing from shame looks like. We will experience it, we will feel it over and over and over again, but it doesn't decide my behavior. It doesn't decide um, that these are the emotions I'm going to feel and they're permanent and they sit in my body, and the only way out is to run from them somehow, right? It doesn't define me that way. It becomes just one voice among many voices inside of me, a part among many parts, right? And where compassion and connection can speak a lot louder in those spaces to address the shame. So happy reflection, and we'll talk soon.